The story begins with First Officer Ben, who receives a phone call from his wife before boarding his flight. Their relationship is strained because they are both struggling with the illness of their young son. His wife asks him to stop running away from his problems and come back home. Meanwhile, at the airport, a passenger named Dan notices smoke coming from a faulty charging cable. He quietly places a power bank inside his red bag, even though such items are not allowed in checked luggage. Because of a careless mistake during the security process, the red bag passes through inspection and is loaded onto the aircraft. As Ben walks through the airport, he meets a little girl named Kora, who is nervous about flying. She asks him if he is the captain. Ben replies that he is only the first officer. Kora innocently asks, "Aren't you too old not to be a captain?" Ben smiles and explains that life sometimes takes people on unexpected detours. Kora is traveling with her father, stepmother, and stepbrother. Her mother has attached a GPS tracker to Kora's clothes, allowing her to monitor Kora's location through a mobile phone. Also on board the flight from Los Angeles to Shanghai is a group of esports players. Tension arises when an American player mocks the Chinese team members. Their captain immediately defends his teammate, but the coach quickly steps in, pulls the American player aside, and apologizes for his behavior. The aircraft is being commanded by an experienced pilot named Richard, and soon the plane takes off from Los Angeles. As the story unfolds, we learn more about Ben's past. He was once a member of the Air Force but was dismissed after physically confronting a senior officer who ignored proper safety procedures. As a result, Ben lost his pension and eventually, he was forced to rebuild his career as a first officer for a second-rate airline. Lily asks her team captain, Sam, why he is afraid to read the letter she gave him. Sam denies it and says he will read it after they return to China. He then goes to the washroom, where he has carefully hidden Lily's letters inside his phone case. At the same time, Kora's father gently pleads with her, trying to comfort and reassure her during the flight. Kora's father asks her to be kinder to her younger brother, Finn, but Kora ignores. Meanwhile, Kora's father goes to the washroom, and her stepmother follows him. At that moment, a faulty charging cable inside the aircraft suddenly sparks and starts a small fire. Finn notices that his parents are missing and asks Kora where they are. Kora directs him toward the washroom, telling him that there is a pool area there and that their parents have gone in that direction. Following her instructions, Finn walks into the next section of the plane. There, he sits beside a passenger who is playing a video game. Finn starts playing along with him. In the cockpit, Ben receives a warning, fire have been detected in the cargo compartment. He immediately activates the aircraft's fire suppression system, but the fire bottles fail to work properly. Ben contacts air traffic control and asks for the nearest airport suitable for an emergency landing. The closest option is Guam International Airport, located about 400 nautical miles to the south. Meanwhile, Kora heads toward the washroom to call for her father. At the same time, two crew members enter the cargo hold with fire extinguishers and attempt to control the flames. However, the fire burns through the cargo restraints, causing a burning container to slide forward and crash into several cylinders. The impact triggers a chain reaction of destruction. A massive hole tears through the aircraft, sending debris flying throughout the cabin and injuring passengers. Lily quickly grabs Kora and protects her as oxygen masks drop from the ceiling. Tragically, Kora's father and stepmother remain unconscious inside the washroom. As debris continues to strike passengers, Captain Richard manages to bring the plane down to a safer altitude and announces that the passengers can remove their oxygen masks. Dan leaves his seat, while Sam rushes toward Lily after leaving the washroom. A flight attendant stops him and makes him sit down, warning that running through the cabin is dangerous. Meanwhile, Dan hides in the washroom and smokes. The burning cargo container then crashes into one of the engines. The engine explodes, tearing another hole in the side of the aircraft and causing several passengers to be thrown out of the plane. The flight controls stop responding, leaving the aircraft crippled over the open ocean. Soon after, the second engine also catches fire, cutting off both power and radio communication. Ben deploys the ram air turbine, restoring essential instruments and limited control of the aircraft. Kora tries to reach her parents, but a flight attendant holds her back. Realizing they have no other option, Richard decides to perform an emergency water landing. He orders Ben to dump the remaining fuel and announces for everyone to brace for impact. As terrified passengers lower their heads and prepare for the crash, Richard and Ben argue over the safest approach. Ben advises landing parallel to the ocean swells to improve their chances of survival. They struggle to reduce the aircraft's speed as Richard tells Ben to move his seat back and tighten his harness. Panic spreads through the cabin as the plane descends rapidly. Finally, the aircraft slams into the ocean. As it skids across the water, it strikes underwater rocks. One wing breaks off, the plane flips upside down, and the fuselage splits into two pieces. Water immediately begins flooding into the wreckage, and many passengers lose their lives in the crash. Some time later, pieces of the shattered aircraft and the bodies of the victims drift across the ocean, while the survivors cry out desperately for help. In the cockpit, Richard lies unconscious and the cockpit glass is about to give way under the water pressure. The flight attendant, Penny, had held on to Kora the entire time. Kora stares out at the scene from the shattered plane. The three pieces of the aircraft are far apart from each other. Penny tells Kora to stay put and goes into the cockpit where Ben is trying to get Richard loose. Richard comes to. He tells Ben to try cutting him out with the crash axe. In the plane's midsection, Sam realizes Lily isn't in her seat. The people still here are badly injured. Sam starts calling out for her. The plane's last section floats upside down in the water. Finn is with a man and a flight attendant named Zoe is there too. Lily is swimming through the water. She climbs onto a broken piece of the plane. Blood streaming from her leg. Back in the cockpit, they cannot free Richard, and the cockpit could give away any second. Ben cannot cut off his leg. He'll bleed to death. Richard tells him to shut the door and get out so the water stays trapped in the cockpit instead of flooding the whole deck. Richard says, "It's your plane now, Ben. Go home. Be with your son." Ben leaves. Richard tells him to check the ELT. Ben takes in the scene outside. In the plane's last section, most of the people are already dead. The whole section hanging upside down underwater. In the washroom, Finn's mom comes to. She wakes Kora's dad. But the instant they open the washroom door, water rushes in. Meanwhile, Richard sits in the cockpit, staring at a photo of his family. The glass shatters and the water takes him too. In the last section, an old woman named Becky still has a pulse. She regains consciousness. They will have to climb higher because the water is rising. Every plane carries an ELT, an emergency locator transmitter. Right now, it would be in the mid-section. And to check whether it activated on its own, Ben would have to reach the mid-section. He decides to swim for it, leaving the raft behind for Penny and Kora. But Penny says let her go. She was a professional swimmer. Kora wants to come with her, desperate to find her parents and brother. Penny tells her to stay put and to look after her shoes. Penny goes in. After she's gone, Kora spots sharks in the water. They scream sharks, sharks at Penny, but she cannot make out a single word. Ben throws the raft into the water, and he and Kora head toward Penny. Meanwhile, the survivors in the last section are only alive because they are trapped in an air bubble. If they open the door to escape, it'll sink and they'll die. On the surface, the shark has closed in on Penny. She hears Kora's voice drawing near, warning her about the sharks, but in that instant, the shark attacks. Ben tries to haul Penny up, but he can't save her. The shark lunges at their raft, too. But Ben beats it back with an oar. In the plane's midsection, everyone crowds into one corner, and the shift makes the plane slide forward a little. A woman tumbles into the water, but she quickly pulls herself back up. In the upside-down section, Zoe wraps a bandage around Matt's injured hand. They all try to calm the crying Finn. In the plane's midsection, Sam tells the survivors that some of them need to move into the water to reduce the weight on the wreckage. The section is resting on a coral reef, and if too much pressure remains on it, it could collapse. However, the American esports player, Hutch, refuses to cooperate. He argues with Sam once again, although even Hutch's coach agrees that Sam is right. Hutch's teammate, Jesse, volunteers to help, but Hutch still refuses. Meanwhile, the piece of wreckage carrying Lily drifts away. Despite her injured leg, she swims through the ocean and finally reaches the midsection, where she reunites with Sam. Their relief is short-lived when a shark suddenly attacks the coach. Jesse tries to save him, but he is also killed by the shark. Blaming Sam for everything, Hutch loses control and starts attacking him. At that moment, Ben arrives and pulls Hutch away before the fight gets worse. In the upside-down section, Zoe offers to swim down and search for an escape route. However, Matt insists on going instead. Becky begs him not to risk his life, but Matt dives into the water using only one good hand. He manages to reach the surface and calls out for help. There, he encounters Kora's father, only to watch in horror as a shark attacks and kills him moments later. Back at the midsection, Ben reminds everyone how lucky they are to still be alive. Out of the 293 people who are on board, he can count only about 30 survivors. He begins searching for the emergency locator transmitter, ELT, while Kora continues looking for her family. Ben finally activates the ELT and gives it to Dan to hold. Soon after, he rushes to save Kora from a nearby shark. During the chaos, one of the rafts drifts away, water floods into the wreckage, and Dan accidentally drops the ELT into the ocean. Meanwhile, Sam is floating alone, holding onto a suitcase and supporting the unconscious Hutch. When Ben asks Dan for the ELT, Dan admits that he dropped it. He coldly says that if it was so important, Ben should have kept it himself. Kora then spots Sam struggling in the distance. Ben realizes they need rescuing too. However, Dan refuses to take the raft toward them because he does not want to risk his own life. He blames Ben for the entire disaster and punches him. Ben fights back and firmly tells Dan that they are going to save them, whether he likes it or not. As sharks circle Sam and Hutch, Ben reaches them just in time and rescues both men. At the same time, the survivors trapped in the upside-down section realize they cannot wait any longer for Matt to return. Becky refuses to leave, asking Zoe to take Finn to instead. Zoe escapes with Finn. Along the way, they discover Matt's lifeless body. The two eventually reach the ocean surface, where they find an unopened life raft nearby. Just then, Lily notices an airplane flying overhead. The survivors wave desperately for help, but the aircraft passes by without seeing them. Nearby, Zoe inflates the raft and is about to place Finn inside when sharks suddenly attack. The sharks begin fighting each other, creating a brief chance to escape. Zoe manages to lift Finn into the raft and climbs in herself, despite suffering a severe leg wound. Exhausted from her injuries, she loses consciousness. Terrified and alone, Finn cries out for help. Suddenly, the raft begins shaking from underneath. As Finn looks down to see what is happening, a shark slams into the raft, leaving him hanging dangerously over the side. In the upside-down section, the water rises to Becky's neck. Thinking about her granddaughter, she prays that God fills the little girl's life with happiness. At that moment, a rescue helicopter finally arrives and begins searching for survivors. At the same time, authorities contact a nearby Chinese fishing ship, informing them that a plane has crashed close to their location and asking them to assist in the rescue. On the life raft, Hutch notices the way Sam looks at Lily and encourages him to confess his feelings. Sam admits that he held back because the team's rules forbid players from dating each other. Hutch simply replies that nobody really follows those rules anyway. Meanwhile, Kora finally accepts the painful truth that her parents did not survive. She remembers her father's last request to look after Finn, but blames herself for failing to protect her 7-year-old brother. Ben gently comforts her and reveals that his own son is also 7 years old. He even shows Kora an old photograph of him. Just then, the rescue helicopter moves toward them, and a rescue swimmer is lowered into the ocean. Ben desperately waves and shouts for them to stop, but they cannot hear his warning. The moment the swimmer enters the water, a shark attacks. Although she is pulled back up, the shark leaps out of the sea and grabs her. Still attached to the cable, her body causes the helicopter to lose control and crash into the ocean. The impact flips the survivors' raft. Everyone manages to climb back on, but during the chaos, Dan pushes a flight attendant into the water to save himself. A shark attacks and kills her instantly. Soon after, the Chinese fishing ship arrives. However, it cannot reach the survivors because a coral reef blocks its path and the water is too shallow. Ben realizes that someone must bring the raft to the ship. Then he notices that Kora is missing. She is standing alone on a piece of wreckage, refusing to leave because she wants to stay with her father. Ben swims toward her while a shark follows closely behind. Reaching her safely, he tells Kora that they have to take one more little detour. He straps her to himself and begins swimming back through shark-infested waters. Seeing their danger, the fishermen throw their entire catch of fish into the ocean. When one shark gets too close, Ben fires a flare gun at it, driving it away. The remaining sharks swim toward the fishing boat to feed. Meanwhile, Dan spots a floating pack of cigarettes, he grabs it and lights up a cigarette. Moments later, a shark attacks and kills him, bringing an end to his selfish actions. The remaining survivors are finally rescued. Sam tells Lily that he never read the letter she gave him and that it is probably lying at the bottom of the ocean. Lily smiles, knowing he is lying and that he did read it but was afraid to admit his feelings because of the rules. Sam gently kisses her on the forehead. As everyone regains phone service, Kora asks to use Ben's phone and checks the GPS tracker attached to Finn's clothes. Following the signal, they discover another raft where Zoe lies unconscious. Moments later, Zoe wakes up and reveals that Finn is safe beside her. At last, Kora and Finn are reunited. Through tears, Kora apologizes to her little brother. In the final moments of the story, we learn that Ben's son is battling cancer. Ben calls his wife, speaks to his son, and says, "I'm coming home." And with that emotional reunion, the story comes to an end.